morning, students. Welcome you for teaching and learning live sessions for BPSC 131 perspective of development and from perspective of public administration. Today, my discussion is on continuations with my earlier discussions of conceptual understanding of public administration and then scientific management theory. Today, I am going to discuss on the Bavarian model of bureaucratic. What is more important to understand that bureaucracy occupies an important place in the administrative studies, and for that matter, we have to must study the Bavarian model of bureaucracy. Weber, Max Weber is a synonym and occupies important positions in administrative sciences so far as bureaucracy is concerned. And he has given the kind of model which is still suitable in the developing country like India in the present context also. And for that purposes, he undertook the study in such a manner that he do not believe in the library size research. He believe in the experimentations, and whatever he views is based on his situational analysis of the Germany at that time. And he is a German sociologist, and accordingly, he studied it in a very dynamic manner, and he occupied an important place in the galaxy of social scientists. And everybody, the concept which is being explained by the bureaucratic concept which is explained by him aims at the power control tendency in organized situation, which is still valid in the contemporary perspective. And what is more important to understand that Weber analysis encompasses diverse field of study ranging from history to comparative social sciences, psychology, and so many other branches of the social sciences. And no other person believed to have this have to study and summarize it in some important lucid manner systematically. So he earned the position of immortality so far as bureaucratic provisions is concerned. And his concerns and his influence on the thinking of administration is obvious from the facts and propositions ranging from the centuries, and different versions of Bavarian model aims at controlling it, making the Weber's conceptualization an important point of the beginning so far as the study of bureaucracy is concerned. And similarly, his theory of legitimacy and dominations have formed the basis of a number of further studies. That's why I'm going to saying you that it occupied the important position so far as administrative sciences is concerned, and bureaucratic provision he has given such important provisions for that. But before coming to his theoretical formulations in the context of theorizations, we have to understand the Weber lives, which is important to understand how he analyzes his writings and develop this model in the forms of characteristics of bureaucracy. First important aspects that he he believed in analysis and in a systematic study, and this kind of things he began with from the age of 13 only. And secondly, he preferred knowledge obtained through practical experiences rather than library research. So you can understand that he believed in empiricism, he believed in experimentations, and that is more important. At the same time, as I told you, he's a German sociologist. So he is a progressive in his outlook, but at the same time, he is conservative at heart. That's why I'm saying you that whatever his formulation he has given is basically concerns at the situational analysis, socio-economic factor existing at that time in Germany, which is maybe still relevant. This is my personal feeling, still relevant. So accordingly, his writings reflect social conditions of Germany at that time, and he visualizes the decline of liberalism and the threat of individualism in the bureaucratization of society. That's why he formulated that kind of understanding in characteristics context. And before coming to that, in a such a manner, he defined authority, organization, and legitimacy. It is better to understand the concepts of authority in an organizational setup and accordingly the legitimacy. And what is more important that amongst Weber's works on administrations, his theories on dominations, leadership, and legitimacy merit special mentions. And he propounded these theories with a broad perspective, keeping in the views and religions and society that we mold the patterns of leadership. That's why I'm saying you the social condition of Germany at that time is very important and his theorization is based on that. They were differentiated, rather given three kinds of provisions of the authoritarian provisions, but before that he differentiated authority, power, and control. To him, person could be said to possess power if in a social relationship, if his will could be enforced despite resistance. That is more important that will of the ruler is acceptable or enforced despite certain resistance in the community and society. As such, this exercise of power becomes control. This is important to control the society at large. And for that matter, structuring of human groups own their existence to a special instances of vested control authority. It manifests when commands of different content elicit obedience on the part of specific individuals. That's the important. Command of definite content elicit obedience on the part of specific individuals, and accordingly to Weber's, authority was identical with the authoritarian provisions of power of command. By authoritarian provisions of power of command, it is important to control the society, and for that matter, it is being enforced despite certain resistance. That is important. So, what is more important, Bidder identifies certain essential components of authority. The body of individual who rule, that component is one important aspect. But at the same time, it is not the only provisions which is important. Other important components of authority is the individual or body of individual who ruled. Acceptance from rule is also important aspects of the authority, that's important. And then third important aspects is will of the ruler to influence conduct of the rules and expressions of that will or command. So it is rooted through the ruler uh, on the rule. So that is this is the third important component. And then four important component is evidence of influence of the rulers in terms of objective degree of command. That is needed. Objective degree of command is needed. So that is the influence of the ruler is important to bring dynamism in the society, even in the present context. That's why he has given legal rational model, which we'll discuss later. And accordingly, whatever may be the evidence of influence, whether it is direct or indirect, it is in terms of the subjective acceptance. Unless subjective acceptance, this is not the authority, which rules obey the commands. That is important aspects. So these five essential components is important. Person who rule, the person who is being ruled, and third important will of the ruler to influence, and then accordingly objective degree of command by the rulers, and then fifth is whether it is directive or indirect influence, it will have to subjective acceptance from the rule. So this is the five important components of authority. But what is more important to understand that authority is not permanent. Authority exists so far as it is being accepted by the rules. So that's why legitimacy aspects comes from that angle. Authority exists as long as it is being accepted as legitimate by the rule. In organization, thus rule or administrator only when it has legitimacy. Explaining the authority of different kinds in the various organizations, Weber concluded that all administrative means dominations. Domination is required to command activity that I told you earlier. He categorized the persons in organization as those who are accustomed, interested in seeing the existing dominations continue as they derive benefit. That's why we obey the state, because we derive the benefits from these kinds of domination and authoritarian provisions. That's why various persons are accustomed and interested in accepting this kind of domination. So that is one. And then apart from that, they are also personally interested in seeing the existing domination continue as they derive benefits. That is also important. They may be personally interested, some person. And then third aspect is those who participate in the domination in the sense that exercise of function is divided among them. So, for division purposes, this exercise, accumulation of power, is not even functioning well in the modern context. So, exercise of function in this divided manner is important. So, accordingly, those who hold themselves in readiness for the exercise of these functions. So, these four aspects is important for the domination purposes in administration as such. And accordingly, Weber defines administration as a domination of exercise of authority. Without exercise of authority, there is no administration as such. And so far as this is his views, but other persons, administrative thinkers, administrative scientists, define it as a service or performance of duty. And so, accordingly, he identified three forms of legitimacy, authoritarian provisions, and each with a different type of apparatus to justify power of command. Legitimacy is to justify power of command, but in a patrimonial setup, he identified two aspects of authority. One is traditional authority, another is a charismatic authority. And third important authority is legal authority, which he says that it is legal rational. These three kinds of authority, as the name suggests, we can understand. But Max Weber says that these three kinds of authority exist side by side in a even present setup in a developing country like India. That is the beauty of these authoritarian provisions of command. But at the same time, he tried to understand this separately also, and for those purposes, he discusses what is the traditional authority. Traditional authority is based on the obedience of the traditions of the Horic past. And this kind of legitimacy, which traditional authority derives from that kind of acceptance only. And the person who are exercising these kinds of authorities are called masters, who enjoy the personal authority by virtue of their inherited status. By default, they possess these kinds of authoritarian provisions, and because of traditional and customary provisions, we believe them as a masters. Their personal, then they enjoy the personal authority accordingly and inherited status, and that's why we follow them. So these kinds of commands carry legitimacy because of custom, but they can also give order based on their personal decisions. That is important. That you have to understand. Even in the present context in India, certain neighboring states we can see even in the Haryana and Uttar Pradesh and Bihar also somewhere we can see these kinds of. Otherwise, it is available everywhere in India as such in developing countries provisions. This they carry legitimacy because of custom, but they also can give orders based on their personal decisions. So, thus, these kinds of conformity related to the customs and personal arbitrariness, and are this is the two important characteristics of traditional authority: custom and personal arbitrariness, which I told you. We follow them because they believe they have inherited status, they have personal authority, because we believe them are the masters, and likewise so many things, and we follow the holy past provision of customary and traditional provisions. And accordingly, who accept these orders, they are called followers. Other one are masters and they are the followers who follow it. And to carry out commands of masters of sheer personal loyalty and pious regards for his time-honored status. In a patrimonial regime, the persons who carry out orders are personal retainers, household officials, relative, favorite of the master, etc. You can understand in the feudal society this kind of provision exists. And in a feudal society, they are the loyal allies of the masters. And beyond the doubt, they have to follow the dictate of these traditional provisions of the masters. Under this kind of authority, according to Weber, administration become irrational as development of rational regulation is impeded as there would be no staff with formal and technical training. So that is why he questions even highlighting these aspects of traditional authority. He himself, in a provision, he highlighted that these kinds of traditional authority in this kind of provisions become irrational Due to development of rational regulation, it impeded as there would be no staff with formal and technical knowledge, technical training. Thus, the system of traditional authority, the officials carrying out orders look like the household staff of the masters, and the spheres of activity changes according to master whims and fancy. So, no constitutional or formal provisions. They work on their whims and fancies. However, all the actions are legitimized in the name of tradition and custom. So that you have to understand what is the implications of these kinds of traditions and custom provisions and these kinds of authority of masters and followers because of personal inherited status and likewise so many things they enjoy it. This kind of traditional authority even exists today in the Persian context in India. And for that matter, he wanted to draw distinctions with other kinds of legal rational model also. Then second authoritarian provisions, he highlighted the charismatic authority. This kind of charismatic provisions of magical power of charisma or heroism or extraordinary qualities of the persons or the leaders, we believe them as a prophet, hero, and accordingly, acceptance comes the basis of the legitimacy based on this. So, power exercised by these kinds of leaders may be prophet, we visualize them as a prophet or as a hero, or by virtue they enjoy the magical power, heroism, and we hypnotically follow these kinds of extra their qualitative provisions of charismatic provision. So Weber defines this charisma as a quality of individual personality by virtue of which he is a set apart from ordinary men and treated as endowed with the supernatural, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional powers of quality. So we follow them because of supernatural, superhuman, and exceptional quality of heroism and magical power. So we hypnotically follow this command, so there is a legitimacy, this kind of charismatic authoritarian provisions. So we receive the command and obey the leader because they believe in extraordinary ability rather than stipulated rules or dignity of the position. So it also differs from traditional authority and at the same time it differs from the legal authority, formal provisions. So charismatic leadership select disciples or followers as his officials based purely on the personal devotions to him rather than other special qualification or status. So these disciple officials constitute the organization and their sphere of activity and power of command depend on the likes and dislikes of the leaders. So again, this is different from the traditional provisions to disciple officials and they depends on the likes and dislikes of that kind of charismatic leadership provisions of heroism, magical power, and extraordinary quality. So this is the charismatic provisions of authority. But at the same time, he highlighted third important aspects of authority, that is legal authority. Legal authority, we can understand that it works through formal provision of institutional organizational setup. And these kinds of legal authority found in organizations and it can be applied by rules and judicially in accordance with the ascertainable principle. It is valid for all member of organizations, whether ruled or rural both. For both these kinds of legal provisions exist, and that kind of exercise of power is not at the whims and whimsy fancy of the superior or leaders or likewise traditional authority provisions. These kinds of exercise of power are from the superior who are appointed or elected by the legal procedure. And that they have to maintain the legal order. They have to work on the provision of rule of law and it should be applied judiciously in accordance with ascertainable principles. And accordingly, subject persons to command are legal equals who obey the laws. So this apparatus that implements the system of legal authority is also subject to the same principle. It is applicable to the both. The person who implement it and the person who obey it, this kind of apparatus implements on the board. So that kind of thing, thus organization is continuous and its members are subject to rules which limits their authority and necessary control in its exercise. That is important. So, what is more important here to understand is that Weber believed that all these three kinds of authority claim legitimacy as long as rule accepts them. That is important. The authority ceases to carry legitimacy when rulers do not do illegal things, ignore the traditions, or lose charisma. That is also. Weber discusses in detail these three kinds of authority as also kinds of leadership. He states that pure type of authority are always found in combination rather than separated from each other. That's why I'm telling you that pure form of authority. And my important implication is that traditional, charismatic, and legal authority exist side by side. And he believed that is a pure forms of authority and always find in combination rather than separated from each other. But Weber insisted that there is a need to analyze them separately. Why there is a need to analyze them separately? That you have to understand in the provisions of India or in a contemporary perspective. To find out what is the compositions of legal, traditional, and charismatic leaders elements. We have to demark the compositions of elements from the legal, traditional, and charismatic provisions, and accordingly, we have to present in a combination. Always possible that with the passage of time, one type of authority tend to acquire the characteristics of other, resulting in a modification of institutional structure. That is important aspects which you have to understand that Max Weber why insisted to understand them, analyze them separately. That first he tried to make a distinction, and secondly he highlighted that during the passage of time, each one type of authority tends to acquire the characteristics of others, resulting in modification, institutional structural provision that is important. So of these three types of authority, Weber preferred the legal type of authority or domination because of inherent rationalities. He believed it is a rational model because of rule of law provision. He maintained that legal type of authority or dominations alone is suitable for the modern government, and Weber designed his model of bureaucracy keeping the legal rationality in mind. In what follows that he attempts is made to elucidate various characteristics of Weberian model in the institutional mechanism for exercise of legal rational authority. So accordingly, what is bureaucracy? Bureaucracy it originated from the word bureau or public. We believe them as a bureau or public officers in some form or other. We always adjunct of organized government all over the world. For instance, in China, even in the period of 186 BC, public offices were existence and persons for those offices are even recruited to do competitive examinations. And accordingly, we saw that history is replicating with this kind of instances of China and regions to show individual appointed or government officers acquire special characteristics, some of which were even universal even in the project context. So, D. Gournay is a French economist who used the word bureaucracy for the first time in the first half of the 18th century, and several other writers after Gournay popularized these terms and used in 19th century. For that matter, J.S. Mill also eminent political economics included bureaucracy in his analysis. Mosca, Mitchell, Pareto, or some other sociologists also wrote extensively on the bureaucracy. But Max Weber, the discussions on the bureaucracy reminded us that Weber was the first social scientist who made a systematic study of bureaucracy, and for that matter, he not theorization or not defined the aspects of bureaucracy, but he highlighted the characteristics and which he said that model of bureaucracy. Weberian model of bureaucracy is a source of inspirations to many. It largely reflects the spirit of modern bureaucracy according to the Max Weber. That is the reason why Weber model is being used as a reference base for other model of bureaucracy. Weber never defined, as I told you, Weber never defined bureaucracy, only described its characteristics. And to him, bureaucracy is an administrative body of appointed officers. Bureaucracy included explicitly appointed officers, only leaving out elected ones. And in the case of authority, Weber categorized bureaucracy into patrimonial bureaucracy found in traditional and charismatic authority, as I told you earlier. And third, rather second aspect is legal rational bureaucracy found only in legal type of authority in the present context. And these characteristics of legal rational bureaucracy, popularly known as Weberian model, are we have to understand it further. And for that matter, Weber believed that legitimacy was the basics to nearly all system of authority, and legitimacy of authority depends on the following important belief. What is the belief? Agencies functions according with the stipulated rules and characterized by three interrelated attributes. Without rule of law, they cannot function. So the power and functions of each official are delimited in terms of impersonal criteria. Their delimitations also. Second is official is given matching authority to carry out his responsibility. According to position, they have given certain roles and responsibilities. They have to perform them only. So then third aspect is the means of the compulsions at its disposal are strictly limited and conditions under which they are employed is legitimate as clearly defined. It is clear cut given in the rule of law provisions. So every officials and every office is a part of hierarchy of authority. Hierarchy is important provisions of Bavarian model in terms of its characterizations. Higher officials or offices supervise lower offices, and officers have the right of appeal. Officials do not own resources necessary for rendering the duty, but they are accountable for use of official resources. Official business and private affairs, official revenue and private incomes are strictly separated. Personal or private matters are separated here. Office cannot be filled by the incumbents as a private property which can be sold or inherited. It cannot be sold, it cannot be inherited. That you have to understand. So then sixth important characteristics is administration is conducted on the basis of written documents. It do not function in a vacuum. They have to function on the certain written document. So that's why they work on a continuous basis 24 hours and stipulated rule of law provisions and accordingly hierarchy and personal and uh, mm, private aspects and public aspect is different and work on the certain aspects of written documents. So this model of bureaucracy, Weber discusses in detail characteristics of officials and accordingly what I told you, they are personally free. They are not servant of anybody personally. They have to function in a impartial manner, not in a partisan manner. They are personally free and they are appointed on the official positions on the basis of contract. So the rule of law, contractual provision is there. That's it. And that exercise of authority delegated to him according with impersonal order, that abstract rules, provisions, and his loyalty is expressed through faithful execution of his duty. So accordingly, they have to follow that kind of role and responsibility and assigns duties and responsibility according to that impersonal orders and rule of law provisions. And appointment and job placement depend on his technical administrative qualifications. So he highlighted technical and administrative qualification is also important. As I told you also, it is full-time occupation. Administrative work is regular, continuous uh, process and it is full-time occupation and accordingly for that purposes they are being rewarded by regular salary and prospects of regular enhancement in lifetime career. So there is no scope of corruption because salary is whatever they work do according to rule of law stipulated provisions. Regular salary is being given and there is a provision also for advancements or increment and that's why it is lifetime career. So in nutshell, what are the characteristics of a variant model? First is written documents. As I told you, written documents is important aspect. They cannot work in a vacuum. Impersonal rules based on the abstract rule law provisions. Then third important provision is hierarchy, graded line of authority. It is demarcations of clear-cut superior-subordinate relationship. And there is a division of labor also there. Fixed area of jurisdiction is there. Laid down qualification, particular post is have to fulfill certain criteria, and it is being repeated by certain regulatory provisions. And there is scope for career advancements and full working capacity of official. You have to work on your full potential. You have to utilize their specialized office management and distinctions between official duties and private spheres of life. So all these are important characteristics: written document in personal order, hierarchy, division of labor, rule of law provision, career advancements, full-time job, and there is a gap distinction between officials and private sphere of competence. So accordingly, what you have to understand that Weber focuses on accountability of bureaucracy. Main purpose is you are accountable to your role and responsibility and to check their applications also. Therefore, he developed this kind of ideal model of bureaucracy, which is legal rational model. And according to Max Weber, modern officialdom functions on the following in the contemporary perspective. They have the fixed jurisdictional area under which the official has to function. Your functional area is well demarcated. Their jurisdictional area is limited by rules and regulations also, which you have to understand. Duty of this jurisdictional area is distributed in a fixed way also. So clear cut again demarcation you have to understand. Next important aspect is authority to give command within the jurisdictional area is also fixed. You cannot function beyond your jurisdictional area, which is otherwise fixed. Provisions are made for regular fulfillment of these duties and regulations for corresponding rights. So all these kinds of provision according to rule of law. The offices follow the principles of written documents, division of work, clear superior subordinate relationship. Then office hierarchy is monocratically organized and centered in a bureau. So that is important. The working of the bureau comes under the domain of public life and is strictly separated from private life of officials. That you have to understand. Knowledge of these rules represents the special technical learning which is official possesses. It involves the jurisdiction of administrative or business management. So these are certain key characteristics in the modern which he says that this is the ideal type of bureaucracy which is exists even today in a modern systematic provisions which I told you. So Weber regarded bureaucracy as good and efficient and held following views on bureaucratic organization. The most efficient means of he visualizes bureaucracy as a most efficient means of controlling work of large number of people. Without bureaucracy, cannot function in the present provisions, and they are technically superior to any other type of organization for accomplishing complex goals. So this is the Max Weber views. Efficient, and they are efficient in bringing about quality since civil services rules and code of conduct reduce discriminations. So they have to bring efficiency. That is important. And he visualizes it as a rational, efficient, and expert because they are masters of problem solving because of specialized knowledge. They possess certain administrative technical qualities, and that's why he believes that they are rational, efficient, and expert to solving the technically superior also, and they are efficient way of managing state affairs, and efficiency is brought through them. So you can understand that they were thought that this legal rational bureaucracy is technically superior to all other administrative systems. Further, he states that people once ruled by bureaucracy can never think of any other alternatives. So that is important here that he visualizes it as an ideal model, and without bureaucracy, society cannot function, administrative cannot work. So hence it is a permanent and indispensable, and it is universal also according to the Max Weber. Though he is limited, for my understanding, it is applicable in the present context in the developing country like India. So, Bavarian model of bureaucracy, the main elements are impersonal orders, rules, sphere of competence, hierarchy, personal and public ends, written documents, monocratic type. These elements are discussed here. Impersonal order. What is impersonal order? Weber ideal type of construct of bureaucracy, the most striking and thought-provoking idea is believed that impersonal order should orient the actions of bureaucracy both in issuance of the commands and subordinate and their obedience to them. They, due to this, they not only have a command, obedience also comes from the subordinate. So that is impersonal order, that is the aspect. And put this word in terms of Merton authority, the power of control which derives from acknowledged status inheres in the office and not in the particular person who performs the official's role. The states of depersonalizations of relationship also plays an important part in bureaucratic trained incapacity. So that is impersonal order. He visualizes for command and obedience. Then rules, fundamental characteristics. This is the second fundamental characteristic of Bavarian model is rational legal authority because it works on continuous setup on based on attributes of continuous organization of official functions which is bound by the rule. Rules which regulate the conduct of an office may be technical rules or norms. Their rational application, however, requires specialized training as has been rightly said by Merton, adherence to the rules originally conceived as a means become an end in itself, and thus occur the familiar process of displacement of good, whereby instruments of value become terminal value. Rules become more important than games. This apart rules cause procedural delay and they create complications in administration. This is the view of Merton, who is an important sociologist, but in terms of Max Weber, is an important aspect which regulates the conduct of office and in a present context it is also important. Next aspect is sphere of confidence. As I told you, they are technically superior, specialized sphere of confidence. There it involves a sphere of obligations to perform certain functions which have been marked off as a part of systematic division of labor. Since they have to work on a component of work, so they are the specialized provisions, they have the technical special knowledge, that is one. The provision of incumbent with necessary authority to carry out this function. They are clearly landmarked, they have to functions, they have authority on this functional provision, so they possess necessary authority to carry out this type of function. So that gives the strength to their functioning. Then clearly defined means of compulsion subject to definite conditions of their use. So that is important, sphere of confidence. Next is hierarchy. Weber argued that organizations or offices follow the principle of hierarchy. Each lower office is under the control of supervision of higher one. Also states that the whole administrative staff under the supreme authority is organized in a clearly defined hierarchy of offices. Weber attached greater importance to the principle of hierarchy in organizations of office and also regard administrative staff who man them. So hierarchy is important provision in Max Weber study. So next is personal and public aims. There is great amount of utility and relevance of in Max Weber ideal type of bureaucracy as far as pleads for separation of administrative staff from ownership of means of production or administration. He pleads for the complete absence of appropriations of official positions by the incumbent. So, for that purpose, these are necessary checks on bureaucracy to prevent them from misusing their position for corruption, etc. purposes. Written documents is important, another important aspect. This is the large principles of Bavarian model of bureaucracy that administrative acts, decisions, and rules are formulated and recorded in writing, even in the cases where oral discussion is the rule or the even mandatory. So written documents is important. Documents makes the administrative accountable to the people and provide ready reference to future actions. Most commendable part of a very model is insistence of selection of technically qualified people. Other criteria officers are fixed salaries paid in money and full-time occupation in office, the prospects for further promotion in career, and the strict systematic discipline and control. So you have to understand all these aspects is written and clear-cut demarcations. Qualification is important, selection criteria is important, fixed salary is important, and prospects for further promotion and lifetime career and strict and systematic applications and discipline and control is important. So, this kind of thing, he believed that it is important in attaining high degree of efficiency. That is why he focuses this important aspect, which I believe that is still Max Weber is, aspects of bureaucratic model is still valid in Indian provision of developing country like India, though it is based on his situational analysis of the Germany at that time he is a German sociologist. But it is being despite this aspects bureaucracy model by given by the Max Weber is criticized on various grounds. First important grounds on which this criticism is given is rationality of his model. The legal rational model is being questioned, which we'll see how. Then second aspect is suitability of the model to the administrative requirements of different place and changing time. In the present context, how it is suitable, that is being also questions, we'll see in detail. Third important aspects which is being questioned is whether the model can attain maximum efficiency as visualized by Weber. Because Max Weber says that they are efficient, trained, and capable, qualified, technically equipped, so there is a maximum efficiency, but it is being questioned by a number of other sociologists on three grounds. Robert Merton and other sociologists have questioned the rationality of legal rational model because he believes that it brings dysfunctional consequences in the present setup. The structure, which is being questioned by Martin and others, especially its hierarchy, rules, which are rational in Weber terms, senses can easily generate consequences of unexpected or which can be detrimental to the attainment of objective of organizations. So, Merton has questioned important aspects of which can generate legal rational model of due to hierarchy and rule of law provision is unexpected in the present context to attainment of objective organization. In stressing these points, Merton is only providing more sophisticated vindication of view that bureaucracy means efficiency. He clearly said that it is not efficient bureaucracy because it works on hierarchy and rule of law provision. So it is very slow, it is inefficient and not efficient also. That is one aspect that is being criticized by Robert Merton. There are other sociologists like Philip Selznick and pointed that division of function in organizations shows how subunits sets up goal and their own which may conflict with purposes of organization as a whole. If these kinds of division of functions within the subunits, it may bring into conflicting situation. Merton and Selznick have shown that formal specification of this organizational structure outlined by Weber is insufficient because in his descriptions they pointed out that how bureaucracy will in fact behave because officials have their own characteristics as a social being beyond those which are administrative code of specific. This criticism reflects the major insights of behavioral side of industrial sociology. So it is being questioned that bureaucracy in a present context cannot work in a important provisions. Talcott Parsons also who translated Max Weber famous work and questions the internal consistency, also ideal type of bureaucracy. Talcott Parsons draw attention to the fact that Max Weber expects the administrative staff to be technically superior as well as possess right to give order. But this itself give rise to conflict within the bureaucracy since it is not always possible to ensure that high position in hierarchy of authority will be matched by equivalent professional skill. And in such cases, the individual working in an organization will face the problems whom to obey, person with the right to command or man with the greater inspiration. And accordingly, my questions comes here, who guards the guardian? From where they take the inspiration, how they comprehend this kind of grading structural dynamics is coming under the question by the Talcott Parsons. So this is the important criticism. And Parsons' criticism is a starting point for Alvin Goldner, who distinguishes two major types of bureaucracy. Firstly, punishment-centered bureaucracy, where members of organization conforms reluctantly to rules which they consider are imposed on them by the alien groups. So it is being questioned by the Parsons, punishment-centered bureaucracy. The second aspect he highlighted the representative bureaucracy, where member regards rules as a necessary on technical ground and their own interest, which is being highlighted earlier. So Goldner and others have raised the problem of compliance with the rules by members of organization, not so much because of informal processes arising within the administrative structure, but to condition outside the organization which orients the behavior of member with the rules. The critics feel that the Bavarian model does not include the orientations of members in relation to rules of organization. So, number of other writers also emphasize on the significant influences of environmental factors on the behavior of organization and thus pointed out the shortcomings of Bavarian model. So Rudolph also complained the Weber model carried misconceptions that administration was a rational machine and officers were technical functionaries. So Rudolph also questions. Bendix, also famous intellectual biographer of Weber, argue against the belief that it is possible to adhere the rule without instructions of general social and political value. All rules have to be applied to a particular case, and it is here that attitude of the official plays a dominant role in making decisions. So, on various ground, it is being questions, and the questions also come, critics also comes from Peter Blau, who believes that Bavarian model of bureaucracy cannot be applied to administration of different places and time in the modern context. Peter Blau felt that fresh look has to be taken at the concepts of national administration in changing environment because the attainment of organizational objectives depends on the perpetual change in bureaucratic structure. So that is important. That is why efficiency cannot be guaranteed by technically officials to set up rigid rules. So according to Peter Blau, the efficient administration is possible only when an individual is allowed to identify with the purposes of organization and to adopt behavior to his perceptions of changing circumstances. So that is important aspects which is being highlighted by Peter Blau. And Robert Prestige also highlighted that Weber concepts of bureaucracy make implicit assumptions about the human motivations, which are not necessarily valid in non-Western environment. William Danley also considered that patrimonial bureaucracy may well be more conducive to economic growth in an underdeveloped society than rational bureaucracy of a varied model. His limitation is different. Joseph Locke Palambara also believes that developing society may find Russian or Chinese methods or the administration more efficient, effective than Western bureaucracy. So these are also questions. So Creel and Spitzer took objections on Weber's claim that rational bureaucracy in modern phenomena. Creel, for instance, asserted that almost all the characteristics of Weberian model existed in China is 200 BC, as I told you earlier. Spitzer considered that functions of the perfect in the 19th century France are far more comprehensive than those attributed to Weber's bureaucrats. According to Frederick Burian, Weber's thesis ignored the important changes brought about the operations of bureaucracy by the rise of doctrine of public liability and accountability and their enforcement by the Council of State. So this is important. All these criticisms are directed to prove that Bavarian model does not fit to the changing environment, changing circumstances, and require administration, particularly in non-Western countries. They are also proved with necessary empirical proof that Bavarian model of bureaucracy cannot attain maximum efficiency. In fact, Bernard and Simon argued that administrative efficiency would fall if we follow the Bavarian structure, and efficiency in the organization would increase through informal relation and unofficial practices. So these kinds of criticism which is being highlighted by Creel and Spitzer is important And he said that it all exists in China at that time, and all these are the function which is being even available in the France in the present context. But they ignore the operations of functional provisions, rise of doctrine in public liability and accountability, and how it is being enforced by the Council of States. So it is being questioned. So Weber defined ideal type of as a internally consistent, and only due to this reason he might have thought that attained maximum efficiency, but Gardner, who tested the Weber ideal type of bureaucracy and found that it has internal contradictions such as tensions between the claim of expertise and claim of obedience based on discipline. La Palambera also points out that bureaucracy, heavily encumbered by the Bavarian norms, may be less efficient instruments of economic change. While giving Indian example, he adds that in a place like India, public administration is steeped in the tradition of Indian civil services, may be less useful as development entrepreneurs than those who are not so rigidly tied to motions of the bureaucratic status, hierarchy, and impartiality. And William Danley, who has tried to utilize Weberian ideal type of bureaucracy by creating a development construct, concludes that unless further ideal type are created, the existing Weberian work seems to have little applicability outside Western Europe and certain Commonwealth countries, including United States. So it is being questioned on various grounds. Simon and Mars also included Weber in the company of classical thinkers like Bureaucratic, and as he took, did not pay attention to the human behavior of organism. The Simon and Mars, they believed that Max Weber ignored the human dimension, human behavior of organization because Weberian ideal type would not attain maximum efficiency as it emphasizes more on the structure of bureaucracy than on human being who personify it. So Philip Selznick, another criticized Weber for his neglect of power that bureaucrats assume, whereby he increasingly preoccupied with his own social position, and this end subverts the professed goals of the organization only in his own power position. So Simon Mars, they criticize Philip Selznick also criticized, so they neglect provisions, so they are not efficient. And no, they also said that no impersonal order can be stopped bureaucracy in becoming power mongers. So may even encourage clandestine motives in them. In democratic setting, it is also very difficult to bureaucrat to be neutral and impersonal in the face of hectic political activity around him. So this question may be right, but it is difficult whether the specific sphere of competence also stands as a good as a Weber thought is to be relation to development administration. Development administration through multifarious new challenges, and administration can only justify his services by meeting them rather wait to get clarifications from superiors. Whether a particular new situation falls under the competence or not, strict adherence to the variant principle leads to delay and inefficiency of administration by providing an excuse for the officers for sink responsibility. So these kinds of questions is very difficult. They cannot be a neutral, and due to political hectic activity around them, it is beyond doubt. Developmental administration provisions also they believe that they are efficient, not efficient. And rigid adherence to the principle of hierarchy was also criticized and does not contribute to response of mutual trust, either on inter-organizational and interpersonal relationship in different administrations. This only embodies mutual suspicions as the prime tenant in the relationship patterns of organization and their staff. These, apart from, are some dangers inherent in these principles, which are disastrous to modern administration. First danger is authoritarianization, authoritarian provisions of the superior, which are detrimental to organizational necessity to work within the team spirit. This is the division tool, which will impede the forming of bureaucracy into cohesive manner. Secondly, documents, which Weber insisted as important as rational bureaucracy, also have negative effects, particularly in the context of Weber bureaucratic commanding committing and development. First, expert down in the files become glorified clerk, they believe. Second is Weber's insistence that every oral discussion should be recorded would result into too much formalism. So it is also questioned. Both are disastrous for efficient and effectiveness of bureaucratic provision in the modern context. So all these themes of this criticism points out the main defects of Weberian model on the rationality ground and various internal inconsistencies there. Degree of rationality bureaucracy can have held depends on the cultural context, which is, I told you earlier, German cultural provision, and which is located, accepting there is a rational bureaucracy everywhere in the world, the critics hold that it must have different features from those which Weber listed. Finally, the very basis of Weber constructed the ideal type held invalid, important, and the Carl Friedrich explained how this ideal type cancel each other. So, in conclusion, what I'm willing to say is Weber's argued that Weberian model of bureaucracy lacks empirical validity, particularly when related to modern administration. But Bavarian model is important provisions of the Germany at that time, as observed by Martin Albro or others. This model will attain efficiency or not, that is questions, but various other things. No doubt, Bavarian model it includes both positive and negative elements. Selections through merit, technical qualification, complete absence of operation officials, and all these are the positive aspects. Maybe certain aspects like impersonal order rules, sphere of precedence, hierarchy, technical rules, written documents may be questionable, but importantly, all these things. So, from this angle, I am going to conclude this. Namaste.